Whispers of the Water, The Enchantment of Mark and the Mermaid. In the opulent penthouse of a Manhattan skyscraper, 18-year-old Mark Miller gazed at the sprawling city below, his mind a tumult of resentment and disbelief. The son of a high-powered CEO, Mark's world had always been one of luxury and predictability, cushioned by the wealth and status of his family. His life was a carefully choreographed dance of elite private schools, exclusive social circles, and vacations to places that echoed the comfort of his golden world. Africa, to Mark, was a distant, almost mythical place, known only through dramatic news stories and the romanticized tales of his late grandmother, who had emigrated from Ethiopia as a young woman. His father, Tewodros, knew that Mark's views on Africa were a complex mix of ignorance and stereotypes that often highlighted strife over beauty, poverty over richness of culture. Mark imagined it as a land of extremes, far removed from his high-tech, polished existence. The thought of leaving his predictable New York life for his father's new job in Kenya felt like a plunge into the unknown, a disruption he neither wanted nor understood. His connection to Africa was like a faint echo, a part of his identity he had never explored. As the plane descended towards Nairobi, Mark pressed his face against the window, his eyes tracing the vast savannas and rolling hills that stretched towards the horizon. "It's not what you expected, is it?" his father asked, noticing his son's rapt attention. Mark shook his head, his preconceived images of barren landscapes and turmoil clashing with the reality unfolding beneath him. "It's different," he admitted, his voice tinged with reluctant wonder. Their new home was a sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city, a fusion of modern architecture and traditional African designs. On his first morning, Mark stepped outside, greeted by the vibrant chorus of bird calls and the gentle rustling of the acacia trees. The air was fresh, carrying scents he couldn't name but felt oddly familiar, stirring something deep within him. Walking through the local market with his father, Mark was enveloped in a tapestry of sounds, smells, and colors. He watched artisans crafting intricate beadwork, their fingers moving with a skill passed down through generations. "Your grandmother used to make patterns like these," his father remarked, picking up a beaded bracelet. Mark touched the beads, their coolness whispering stories of a heritage he had never explored. "I never knew much about where she came from," he said quietly. Mark's fingers lingered on the beads, their intricate patterns a stark contrast to the sleek, modern gadgets that filled his room back in Manhattan. A pang of longing surged within him, a yearning for the familiar buzz of the city, the laughter of his friends echoing in their favorite hangouts. He pictured their faces, imagining the stories they were sharing without him, the inside jokes that he was now missing. The thought left a hollow ache in his chest. As he followed his father through the market, Mark's steps were hesitant, his eyes darting back to the safety of their car. He felt out of place amidst the vibrant chaos of the market, the air thick with the scent of spices and the melodious rhythm of Swahili. It was as if he was standing at the edge of a world he couldn't, or perhaps didn't want to, understand. "I could be hanging out at Central Park now, or playing video games in my room," Mark thought ruefully. He imagined the skyline of New York, the comforting grid of streets, and the predictable rhythm of urban life. "Everything here is so different, so unfamiliar," he mused, a sense of alienation washing over him. Even as his father chatted amiably with the locals, Mark's mind wandered back to his life in New York. He envisioned himself walking through the familiar doors of his school, greeted by nods and smiles. By the end of the day, as the African sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and deep purple, Mark's resolve had hardened. He had accompanied his father through the bustling streets and markets, a spectator to a life so vastly different from his own. despite his father's enthusiastic attempts to show him the beauty and richness of this land. In spite of his firm decision to leave, Mark found himself the next morning following his father through the dense jungle, their path leading to a large old building cloaked in vines and the whispers of time. The structure, a grand edifice of faded glory, stood 3 stories high, its walls echoing stories of a bygone era. His father's voice, filled with excitement, broke through Mark's thoughts. "This will be our second home here in Kenya," he declared, gesturing towards the building. "Just imagine it, Mark. Renovated and brought back to life." Mark barely listened, his thoughts still circling his escape plan. The most striking feature of the property was a huge, old pool, mysteriously filled with water, its surface still and enigmatic. As his father moved off to further explore the building, Mark seized his chance. He slipped away, intent on making his break for freedom. But as he passed the pool, a noise from the water halted him in his tracks. Turning, he saw the head of a girl, about his age, just breaking the surface. Her gaze met his, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. She was mesmerizing, her beauty striking in a way that rooted Mark to the spot. Recovering from his initial shock, Mark called out to her, "Hey, you can't be here. This is private property." The girl offered no response, just continued to look at him with an intensity that felt almost palpable. Frustrated, Mark commanded, "Get out of the pool, now!" But she remained motionless, her eyes never leaving his. The thought of entering the water to remove her crossed his mind, but he quickly dismissed it. He couldn't swim, and the murky depths of the pool were inscrutable. Turning his head, Mark scanned the area for something, anything that might help him get her out. But when he looked back, the girl was gone. Confused, he waited, expecting her to reappear. But after 30 minutes, the surface of the water remained undisturbed. Determined to find out where she had gone, Mark circled the pool. The old stone tiles were cool under his feet, the air filled with the scent of damp earth and ancient secrets. But there was no sign of the girl, no other way she could have exited the pool that he could see. Mark's heart raced, the sight of the girl in the pool both unnerving and captivating him. The image of the girl's haunting gaze lingering in his mind. The rational part of his mind told him he should be frightened, wary of this strange, silent girl who seemed to appear and disappear at will. But there was something about her, a serenity in her gaze, a calmness that belied the oddity of the situation. It was as if she knew him in a way no one else did. He resolved to keep the encounter to himself. Mark knew his father was desperate to find something, anything, that would spark his interest in staying in Africa. Mentioning this mysterious girl would only fuel his father's enthusiasm, turning what Mark wanted to believe was a mere curiosity into a prolonged discussion. He wasn't ready for that, not when his own feelings about this place and about the girl were so tangled and undefined. Yet, as they walked back home, Mark found himself scanning the faces of the girls they passed. None of them held the ethereal beauty of the girl in the pool. She seemed to belong to a different world, one that Mark had never encountered in the bustling streets of New York or in the glossy scenes of movies. Driven by a force he couldn't quite understand, Mark found himself back at the pool the next day. The water lay still and quiet, no sign of the mysterious girl. He waited, the sun climbing higher in the sky, his hope dwindling with each passing hour. Throwing stones into the water, he watched the ripples distort and then disappear, much like his fleeting hope of seeing her again. Maybe I did scare her off, he thought, a twinge of regret weaving through his frustration. As he turned to leave, resigned to the fact that the girl would just remain another unanswered question in this unfamiliar land, a sound from the water stopped him in his tracks. He spun around, his heart leaping into his throat, to find her there again, her intense gaze and beautiful face emerging calmly from the water. She was back. Mark's initial surprise quickly gave way to a sense of awe and an unspoken question. Who was she, and why did she keep appearing to him? Mark, jolted from his stunned silence, blurted out the first thought that sprang to his mind. "Get out of that water. This is my father's property." His voice echoed with a mix of authority and disbelief. For the first time, a spark of understanding flickered in the girl's eyes, and she gently parted her lips, her voice floating to him, soft and melodious. "Very well, I shall leave the water, but I cannot linger long on land." As her sweet, almost ethereal voice caressed his ears, Mark felt an unexpected shiver run down his spine. It was a voice that seemed to resonate with the very essence of the place, a sound as natural and as mesmerizing as the rustling of leaves in the wind. With a graceful movement, the girl hoisted herself onto the pool's edge, revealing the stunning reality of her lower half. Instead of legs, a magnificent tail, adorned with shimmering scales, glistened in the sunlight. Mark's mouth fell open in awe and disbelief, his mind struggling to reconcile the sight before him with reality. A mermaid, in his father's pool, in the heart of Africa. She was a creature of legend, a mermaid, her presence defying every law of nature he had ever known. The revelation struck Mark like a bolt of lightning. I don't understand," Mark stammered, his initial demand forgotten. The mermaid looked at him, her expression gentle, a hint of amusement in her deep, sea-blue eyes. "There's much you don't understand about this place, Mark," she said, her voice a melody that resonated with the sounds of the water. "This land, your father's house, they hold more secrets and magic than you know." Mark took a hesitant step closer, his eyes fixed on her tail, still partly submerged in the water. "But how? Why are you here?" he asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and awe. The mermaid's smile widened slightly. "I've been here long before this pool was built, long before your family lived. I come and go. I am a guardian of these waters, a keeper of the stories and the spirits of the land. Your presence here, it's no coincidence." Mark's mind raced, the reality of her words sinking in. A guardian of the waters, a being of myth and legend, here in his father's pool. It was a lot to take in, and yet part of him felt an inexplicable connection to her, to this place. "But why me? Why show yourself to me?" Mark asked, his skepticism giving way to a genuine desire to understand. The mermaid looked at him, her gaze deep and knowing. "Because I am yours. I have returned because you are here. Your father, Tewodros, many years ago, promised us to each other. No doubt he has forgotten, his earthly wealth taking the place of his honor." The smile on her face, so serene and knowing, struck a chord deep within him, sending a pang of inexplicable emotion through his heart. He took a cautious step forward, his eyes never leaving her. "Mine? What do you mean?" he asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and curiosity. The concept was bewildering, a mermaid claiming some sort of bond with him, a boy from a world so different from the depths she called home. "I don't understand," he continued, his scientific, rational mind struggling to grasp the surreal situation. "How can you be mine? We've never met before. I don't even know you." The mermaid's gaze remained steady, her eyes reflecting the depth of the waters she emerged from. "In the language of the sea, yours does not mean possession. It means connection, a tie that goes beyond time and place. My return to these waters coincided with your arrival. Our paths were meant to cross." Mark's skepticism battled with the part of him that was captivated by the mystique of her presence. The idea of a predestined connection, especially with a being as mystical as a mermaid, was a lot to absorb. Yet, as he stood there, looking into her eyes, he couldn't deny the strange, almost magnetic pull he felt towards her. It was as if she was a missing piece in a puzzle he didn't know he was trying to solve, a link to a heritage and a land that he had yet to fully understand. "Meant to cross?" Mark echoed, his voice softening. But why? And why now? The questions lingered in the air as Mark grappled with the mystery and wonder of the moment. Mark, my name is Amana, and this place, your heritage, is more than just a location on a map. It's a part of who you are, a part of your story which is only just beginning. Mark stood there, the sound of the water lapping gently at the pool's edge, the mermaid's presence both unsettling and mesmerizing. The mermaid's eyes, deep and fathomless as the ocean, held his with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. Mark felt a rush of emotions he couldn't name, a tumultuous sea of feelings that both scared and exhilarated him. In the midst of his doubts and disbelief, a part of him, a part that resonated with the ancient rhythms of this land and its hidden wonders, believed her. As Amana's hand reached out to Mark, her words lingered in the air, a prophecy sealed with destiny. Now that you have seen me, you will not be able to leave me, she said, her voice a gentle yet powerful whisper. Mark, pulled by a force beyond his understanding, stepped closer, his rational thoughts eclipsed by the enchanting pull of her presence. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and clasped Amana's. Her touch was cool and soothing, like the water she called home. As if guided by an ancient rhythm, Amana gently slid back into the pool, her hand still clasped in Mark's. He followed her, step by step, drawn into the depths as if by a siren's call. The water embraced him, cool and welcoming, as he moved deeper, his head finally slipping beneath the surface. At that very moment, Mark's father arrived at the pool, his eyes widening in horror as he saw the final ripples of their descent. He dived into the water, desperation fueling his movements, his heart pounding with fear for his son. He searched frantically, his hands sweeping through the water, but Mark and Amana were nowhere to be found. After what felt like an eternity, he emerged, gasping for air, and called for help. The pool was drained, every inch examined, but there was no sign of Mark. He had vanished, as if swallowed by the pool itself. The mystery of Mark's disappearance lingered in the air, a haunting question to all except Mark's father, who thought his promise to the mermaids had been forgotten by them and that his wealth that they allowed him to have would no longer come at a cost. It had been so many years. It was before Mark was born that the baby was promised to the sea, and since they had not taken him as an infant, he did not think they still cared to do so. Consumed by grief and guilt, he shouted at the pool begging that his wealth would be taken, and his son returned. But his shouts went unanswered. In the days that followed, the story of the boy who vanished into the pool spread, becoming a legend in its own right. Some said Mark had been taken by spirits. Others whispered of secret passages hidden beneath the water. But the truth lay in the depths of the pool, in the embrace of the mermaid, Amana. Mark, now a part of a world he had never imagined, embarked on a journey through realms unseen, guided by Amana. In the water, he found a new home, a new destiny. His old life, his ties to the world above, forgotten, as he embraced his new existence in the depths, forever bound to the mermaid who had shown him the wonders of a world hidden beneath the surface. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, Mark's life beneath the water with Amana transformed him. Instead of legs, he now had a mermaid's tail. He learned the language of the sea, swam alongside dolphins, and discovered hidden underwater cities. His initial reluctance to embrace his new life faded away, replaced by a deep sense of belonging and love for the world Amana had shown him. Amana, this place, it's incredible, Mark breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. Amana smiled, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. It is here I wanted to bring you, Mark, to ask you something that my heart has known since the day we met. Mark looked into her eyes, feeling the strong connection that had grown between them. What is it, Amana? She took his hands in hers, her touch gentle yet full of purpose. Mark, in the time we have been together, you have shown me the strength of your spirit and the kindness of your heart. You have embraced this world and become a part of it. I cannot imagine a life without you by my side. Would you stay with me, here in this magical world forever? Mark felt his heart swell with emotion. The life he had known on land already gone as if by a spell. Here with Amana, he had found a love and a peace he had never known. He gazed into her eyes, which held the depth of the oceans, and without hesitation he answered, "Yes, Amana. There is nothing I want more than to be with you, to be a part of this magical world. My heart is yours, as is my life from this moment on." Amana's face lit up with joy, and she leaned in to kiss him. As their lips met, the water around them seemed to dance. In that kiss, Mark's old life on land was left behind, and a new chapter began, one filled with love, adventure, and the magic of the sea.